I promise I'm not trying to be like a depressing ass channel, but there's stuff to talk about, guys. All right. So, I mean, I think we could all kind of tell right now that the economy's kind of ruining the world, right? Like, unless you're some rich ass billionaire or Nepo baby or something, like, we're all kind of struggling out here. I think that we're all feeling it. And, rather than making a video essay about something that's like a real important, real world issue, I want to take a look at how that's impacting football, and particularly one of the leagues that kind of helped me fall in love with the sport in the first place. So across the top 5 leagues in Europe right now, I think you can definitely see a lot of the different symptoms of this crazy football economy that we're in right now. And La Liga is definitely one of the spots where this is most prevalent. There's just so much chaos going on in La Liga at the moment. And I mean, with sport and with anything in life, there's a huge correlation between financial power and success, which is why boring nerd finance stuff like this matters to football fans, because the financial power and the financial stability of your club is really going to affect how you end up performing in the long term. So with La Liga, it's one of those leagues that kind of, growing up, it had this like magic to it, this mystique where like the best international players, all these unknown South American gems, it seemed like where the true like artists of the game were at a certain point, especially with the big two clubs in La Liga. And I mean, as a kid growing up watching those El Clasicos, Messi versus Ronaldo, like every single game felt like its own Champions League final. It was its own mega event. And then for me personally, there was that goddamn Neymar transfer that really sealed it for me. At that point I was kind of going in and out of my football fandom. I was paying more and more attention, but that was the moment where I really kind of knew like this is what I want to be a fan of. This is what I want to be a part of, the community that I'm going to invest myself into. It had those beats of like, Ronaldinho at Barca back in the day, R9 in the all-white Madrid kit, Zinedine Zidane. Watching these highlight videos growing up, it's just those kits and those players, it made you feel something. Those badges made you feel something. And I just don't think the current young stars of the league have that same kind of pull. And just in making that realization that the league had kind of fallen away so far from what I knew it for growing up, what I loved it for growing up, that's where the inspiration for this video really came from, to take a deeper look and figure out what the hell is going on and why are these clubs struggling so much relative to the rest of Europe, what's going on with the financial situations. Just I wanted to kind of contextualize it all for you guys and hopefully explain why La Liga just doesn't have that same magic anymore. And so we got to start with explaining the whole sustainability model in La Liga right now. Ever since 2013, they implemented these financial restrictions, which that's kind of going to be the main crux of this video. These financial restrictions are a really divisive subject. Even within myself, I'm not too sure how I feel about it still. So yeah, let's just kind of take a look at what this whole financial regulation shit is about. So I'm assuming that we all kind of understand what financial fair play is, at least to some degree know that it exists, and especially with the way the teams have kind of treated it, I think we can see that it's a really flimsy, not too serious kind of regulation. There's lots of room for the clubs to excuse unprofitability and basically make it to where they can run at a huge loss, and UEFA just kind of turns the other way with it. You got stuff like these shady sponsorship deals, the intentional misreporting of different financial records. And essentially, if you're Manchester City, you can break the rules over 100 times and still play in the biggest competitions, win the biggest trophies, and no one really cares. So money talks. Money definitely talks with the FFP stuff. And ultimately, what it really, really comes down to is if you have the bankroll to just drag it out in court and fight them and fight them and fight them until UEFA gives up, then you can kind of do whatever you want. And that's what we see the mega rich elite clubs across Europe doing outside of Spain. You see, because La Liga clubs, they don't get this same loosey-goosey kind of do whatever you want regulations. No, no, no. Every season, each club in La Liga is given a strict budget that they have to adhere to by La Liga. And that budget is assessed by independent financial nerds who kind of look at the profit that the clubs are taking in versus all the expenditures that they have, and figuring out where they need to be at as far as what they can be spending on players, like transfers and wages and stuff, in order for these clubs to remain sustainable and profitable long term.
Don't talk to him! He is in big trouble!
What'd he do?
Meanwhile,
But, Mom, I have to get some Pokemon doll before everybody else does, 'cause then I'll be cool.
Can't it wait till tomorrow, hun?
But, Mom, I have to get the first one, else people won't think I'm cool.
All right, let's go.
Sweet.
So I had to do a lot of research to try and understand these rules as best I can, and part of that was looking at a really great post on Reddit. I don't remember the guy's name off the top of my head, but I'll make sure to do that somehow, you know? And yeah, basically one of the big parts of this Reddit post was explaining what actually falls under these La Liga regulations, and it really is a lot. It's not just transfer fees and wages. It's not just as simple as that. So it's all the registered first team players, head coach, assistant coaches, fitness coaches, any other coaches, players who are in the club but aren't registered, so like your youth players and whatnot, and any former players or former staff members who are still owed compensation. And then on top of that, you've also got loyalty bonuses, trophy bonuses, agent fees, transfer fees, social security contributions, and payments for image rights, payments for the player cost amortization, and all of that stuff needs to fit into the squad cost limit. So essentially all of the major operating budgets that you'll have as a club in La Liga, those all need to be accounted for by this magical number that you're given by the league. And this is really, really, really holding clubs back in La Liga as far as being able to make big transfers and then get big sales and keep that cycle going. And that's because selling a player at a loss and just kind of moving on with your life as a club isn't really an option for clubs in La Liga. So when you take a loss in the Premier League or any other league, you have seasons after seasons to kind of push that debt around and figure out what you're going to do with the numbers. In La Liga, it's season after season. And so, you know, for example, let's take a look at the Rafinha situation. If Barcelona were to try and sell Rafinha this summer, as they are, but sell him for less than, I believe it's around 40-something million euros that they have left on the amortization of his transfer fee, that, whatever that number is in between, let's say they sell him for 30 mil, that 13 to 15 million euros, whatever it is, that money would be taken away from the budget that Barcelona has for the season to go out and make transfers, pay wages, and all that other stuff we talked about. So selling that player at a loss, it instantly, like, money disappears from the bank account and they now have to operate at a lower level. So they're trying their hardest. All the clubs in La Liga are trying their hardest to break even on these transfers with the amortization, which is putting them in a really weird spot because clubs know this. Clubs aren't stupid, and so they can kind of just offer you exactly what you're looking for, not too much more. And if there's not a whole lot of demand for the player, that's kind of all that they're going to be able to accept. You can't drive that price up the way that clubs in other leagues are able to with a more open and free market. And looking back at Rafinha's situation specifically, it really sucks for the player and the club because he's now stuck at a club where he knows he's not really wanted. But Barcelona as a club only have a small handful of clubs that can actually afford to pay him a competitive wage with what he's currently making at Barca and pay that transfer fee that Barca's looking for to make that a profitable transfer and not lose too much in the whole squad cost limit that they're trying to account for. And so basically all of this nerdy financial stuff means that they are stuck with Rafinha. They can do nothing to get rid of this guy. He's just there. He doesn't want to be there. He's just there. Let's take a look at another way that this can impact the club. Let's take a look at the other big boy in Spain. Let's take a look at Real Madrid. So it is the most obvious open secret in football that they are going to try and sign Kylian Mbappe either this summer, next summer, soon. They're going for Mbappe. We know this. What hasn't really been talked about or focused on is the way that Real Madrid is scraping together every penny they can, saving up money like it's 8-year-old Eli saving up for goddamn Pokemon cards. Like, this shit is embarrassing. They are broke. That's how they're acting. Since COVID, Real Madrid have only made 3 purchases larger than 30 million euros, that being their new wonder kid midfield trio of Camavinga, Tchouaméni, and Bellingham. And during that time, they've sold 5 players over that 30 million euro mark. Now, this might not sound super crazy. They brought in some players, they've sold some players. What's the big deal? This is Real Madrid that we're talking about here. This is the Galacticos. This is the team that's supposed to have superstar players in every position. You're supposed to look down that lineup at the start of the match when they're all lined up next to the referees, and it's just supposed to be, you know, all-time great, all-time great, all-time great, one by one by one. you don't see that anymore. You don't see them going out and making these big superstar, let's sign Ronaldo, and then a few years later, let's sign Gareth Bale, let's throw in Mesut Ozil, let's get Angel Di Maria, Even going further back in time, you had the original Galactico team with Beckham, Ronaldo, Zidane, they don't they don't do that anymore. They've got these really tenured stars in their squad that have managed to keep their levels up to where we aren't really noticing that downfall yet. They've still managed to do pretty well in Europe. They're still relatively competitive in La Liga, but when's the last big signing that you remember from Real Madrid, barring this recent signing of Bellingham, which I feel like is the first genuinely world-class player they've even tried to sign since they threw all that money at Hazard, God knows how many years ago. And so what's the impact of that? Real Madrid isn't that sexy, amazing club to watch anymore. It's not that club that gives me that sort of like excitement and wonder anymore. They're beatable. You know what I mean? It's insane to think that, but they're no longer the elite superpower in Europe that strikes fear into the hearts of opponents. It's just another okay European team, especially now that they've sold Benzema, haven't really replaced him. I think this season you're really going to feel the pain if you're a Real Madrid fan, and this is where La Liga is at in general. It's the same story with Atletico. This is a team that was consistently making deep runs into the Champions League, consistently looking like they could challenge for potential runs in La Liga, even winning a La Liga title. And since then, what? Like they made a huge signing bringing in Griezmann from Sociedad, which in 2023 would never happen. That player would be sold to the Premier League 100%. Just look at Nico Jackson. And really, I mean, I guess you would say is the João Felix signing is when they tried. And, again, this is what happens. If you're a club in La Liga and you make a big signing and it doesn't go according to plan, look at how handicapped they've been since then. Look at the lack of, they can't make up for their mistake in the way that other clubs can. They made that poor signing, spending all of that money on a teenager, and cooked an entire generation, basically. Like, at that point, the entire squad is done. They're not going to be able to make signings to continue to improve. They just have to be kind of stuck and content with what they have and make these little one in, one out kind of moves to try and keep things moving in a positive direction. But Atletico's a glorified Europa club at this point. Nobody's looking at these guys with any sort of seriousness in Europe, and that's so embarrassing. That's so sad. This is Atletico Madrid that we're talking about here. And kind of, I know I've been teasing it a bit, talking about European success, but I think that's the next major point that we have to look at with this whole financial mess that's going on in Spain is the success in Europe is going to start to fall off with this in correlation. You're going to start to see less and less of these Villarreal teams making runs late into the Champions League like we saw last year. And even then, look at how that side has got picked apart. All of their star players one by one getting snagged away. And it's half the time it's not even by big clubs, man. Like Pau Torres got snatched up by Aston Villa, bro. Aston fucking Villa. Bro. Aston Villa? Come on. And look, man, I'm not trying to say that if you aren't a major club in the Premier League that you shouldn't be able to make big signings. Jesus. Ugh. But we definitely have to recognize the imbalance that's going on here. You've got mid-table, maybe Europa League clubs in England that are able to easily, with no seriousness at all, it doesn't even take much. They don't have to make major player sales or anything. Just off the strength of the financial muscle of the Premier League and their ownership model, they can flex their financial muscle and they can, boop, oh, yeah, Nico Jackson, oh, yeah, he's going to Chelsea now. Oh, Pau Torres, oh, yeah, he's going to Aston Villa now. And the Premier League can just kind of pick these teams apart however they see fit. And this is a cycle that continues the snowball because if you're not able to sell that player for a big fee, which adds on to the cap limit of the next season, which keeps everything lower, which means you have to continue selling players for low fees and continue buying players for low fees, which keeps your squad cap low, and it continues the cycle, and it goes on season after season, and the snowball continues, and they're gonna break La Liga. When you compare the seriousness that these clubs have to take with their transfers and how absolutely precise and perfect they have to be, not a single pound can go to waste. And then you compare it to the clubs like Manchester City and Chelsea in the Premier League who have been so unbelievably wasteful. So unbelievably wasteful. You spend a world record fee on a goalkeeper and he ends up not working out, it's fine. We'll replace him. It doesn't even matter. And yes, we'll continue to improve the squad as we do that. Oh, we signed a £100 million winger and he didn't really fit into the squad. It's cool. We'll put in our world-class youth academy talent for a season, let him figure himself out, and he can kind of just come in whenever he's feeling like it. I mean, shit, even I can't even act like my team is innocent in this. I'm a Manchester United fan, and we do the same shit. We blew all this money on Harry Maguire, tried him out for a season or two, realized, and what do? Rafael Varane, Lisandro Martinez, let's get him in there, let's get it done. And we're still being linked with center backs. We still might sign Todibo this summer, Diassi or something. So I get it, you know. It sucks to be a fan of a club outside of the Premier League right now. And this financial imbalance is really going to start to have a greater impact on the actual results in Europe. It's been getting bad. We are already seeing the big boys in Spain falling off, and it's just gonna get worse, man. To contrast that, we've seen some recent positive trends with teams from Serie A going a bit deeper into European competitions recently, more diversity in their champions, you know, going back and forth between multiple different clubs. And on paper, that's great. It looks great. The league has been more competitive. There's a lot of great players in Serie A right now, and it is kind of having a bit of a revival from where it was at in the, you know, mid to late 2010s. That being said, both of the Milan clubs are in ridiculous debt right now. Juventus is in ridiculous, all sorts of turmoil, you know. And then you got Napoli with their eccentric rich owner who kind of gives off a little bit of Premier League vibes, but that's only because of De Laurentiis and his individual wealth. And so that is again a situation similar to the Milan clubs, which over years and years of poor investment could eventually really handicap that club as well. And so it's like a weird kind of issue where the road to success is by being a financial idiot. That's basically what we're seeing in Europe right now. If you just throw as much money as you can at the problem, that seems to be the solution. And so I guess, what the hell does this mean in the long term? That's the thing where I get really stuck and go back and forth with it. There's definitely a part of me that feels like the fact that clubs are being forced by La Liga to run in a more sustainable model financially, it's going to lead to better investment into youth academy facilities, more intelligent transfers, hopefully more investment into stuff like sports science and data analytics, which allow clubs to be more intelligent in the transfer market, which is something that I think you've seen from some clubs in the Bundesliga and even some Premier League clubs, which has allowed clubs to outperform their means financially. But that being said, that's a really shitty situation to be put in where you literally can't compete with the finance of other leagues, so you have to find these other ways to be more creative and smart with your money. That's commendable for those who do it, but it's also a tough situation to be forced into. And as these problems continue to snowball, as I've said, you know, these budgets aren't going to just magically have some huge investment coming in. You know, the TV deal that the Premier League is on, the broadcasting rights, it's like double the value of La Liga's. And so there's just so much more money flowing around that system. There's so much more bread to go around that it kind of makes sense that we're in this weird position with La Liga where I'm not too sure what the future holds for them. You know, it could be one of those things where the investment gets smarter and that brings them back to a level of being able to compete. Or maybe we're in the very early stages of the English Super League and that's where we're all headed, and all of the biggest players and it's all, the money's just going to funnel into that one country and it's basically going to become the NFL of football. I don't know, and nobody does, and that's the thing that's really shitty. And especially if you're a fan of a team in Spain, you know, my best friend is a FC Barca fan, and damn, you know, I feel for him, man. You know, this guy has to watch his club in absolute turmoil every summer. It's just more and more drama, and there's no end in sight. You know, every season it's the same headlines, it's the same stories. Clubs struggling to make transfers, struggling to make decent sales, and as long as these rules are continuing to be in place in the way that they are, I don't really see the cycle changing. And so that brings us back to the top of this where I was talking about the magic and the mystique. It's gone, man. For me personally, I don't really see it anymore. You know, the best players are going to England. That's where it's all at. That's where the best competition is. That's where the teams that are winning the biggest competitions consistently are at. And I do have some hope for the young generation of stars in La Liga at the moment. You know, guys like Vinicius, Pedri, Gavi, you know, and of course the new superstar signing Bellingham. It gives me some faith that if these guys are able to hold out strong in La Liga, develop in that league, it could bring it back to a place where kids growing up are going to watch Vinicius the same way that I felt about Neymar. You know, kids are going to grow up watching Pedri the same way I felt about Iniesta, and that would be great. But as of today, as of 2023, starting the 23-24 season, none of those players just have that, you know? And I think it's because they're not competing at the top level. That's what, for me, just makes it not have that same impact, you know? I grew up watching highlights of Iniesta bossing it in the biggest games in Europe, destroying my team at that points, and you just don't see that from Pedri. You see flashes from Vinny, especially with the success that they've had in Europe recently, but again, it it really was Benzema's team, you know? And it's getting to the point where these younger guys really got to step up. Something has to happen here, you know? I hope for the sake of the league and for the sake of football in general that we see these clubs find a way to get back into the top tier of competitive football, but as of right now, La Liga is broken. I hope I did a good job explaining all of that stuff. It was a really complicated subject, and I just wanted to give a little bit of context as to the handicap that these clubs in Spain have and why the league is falling in the way that it is. I know the last couple videos have been a bit pessimistic. I'm going to try to get away from this shit. You know, it's going to be lots of fun, lots of shiny new things happening. Season's all about to start. More tactical stuff, more transfer stuff, just all of that happy-go-lucky Teletubbies shit that we all love. You know, it's coming back, baby. We're back. But until then, peace.